Friends, greeting from somewhere in the San Joaquin Valley. I'm preaching at, I don't know, a parking lot, a white spot in the road along I-5 because my daughter Mimi is in her first year at Cal State Long Beach, which, like every other school I know about, has discontinued in-person learning for the rest of the semester and traveled to and from educational institutions for the sake of facilitating at-home learning is what we call essential travel right now. I stopped here to film my sermon because in today's sermon I'm focusing on a verse from Psalm 63 in which the psalmist describes their spiritual condition by saying, "My soul thirsts for you, my flesh faints for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water." During Lent at Montclair Presbyterian Church, we are following the prompting of the World Council of Churches by focusing on water as a symbol and as a metaphor during Lent. We've talked about the water of tears, we've talked about the waters of the flood, and we've talked about the waters of creation. And this week we're talking about drought. We're talking about what happens spiritually when we lack water or lack anything else necessary for the sustaining of life. Now, for those of us who are Californians, the idea that drought shapes us spiritually might not come as such a surprise, although some of us might not have noticed that drought was forming us. Sometimes it's hard to notice what happens all around us. But as Westerners, we are people formed by drought. In fact, Wallace Stegner, a writer who spent his career chronicling life in the American West, Stegner defined the American West not by a line marking some longitude on a map, but instead he defined the American West as that part of North America that gets less than 20 inches of rain. 20 inches of rain being what is necessary to grow crops without irrigation. The one exception for this rule are the coastal parts of the Pacific Northwest where the rainfall is substantially higher. But even so, for the early European settlers, getting to the Pacific Northwest overland meant crossing vast stretches of arid land, and that journey through the desert had a powerful impact on people used to greener and moister climates east of the Missouri River. As a writer, Wallace Stegner seldom touched on matters of faith, but he does make the following observation, which has given me a lot to think about since I first read it a few years ago. Stegner writes of early European settlers by saying that when they came west, they crossed a border of strangeness. Only a few miles into the west and they felt difference, and the degree of strangeness can be measured by the fact that almost all of the new animals they misnamed. Almost all the new animals they saw, they misnamed. The prairie dog is not a dog. The horned toad is not a toad. The jackrabbit is not a jackrabbit. The buffalo is not a buffalo. And the pronghorned antelope is more a goat than an antelope. With all of its dry strangeness, the West, according to Stegner, has robbed us of the gods that make places holy. It has cut us off as individuals and families and communities from the memory and the continuum of time. It has left at least some of us with a kind of spiritual pelagia. I lost my place, but hold on. It has left some of us with a kind of spiritual pelagia, a deficiency disease, a hungering for the ties of a rich and stable social order. In other words, living in a dry land leaves us longing for God, which is exactly what the psalmist said. And I think it is precisely the disorientation of living in a dry place that can direct us to God. And there's a great tradition of finding God in dry places. The Israelites certainly found God in the desert on their way to a promised land. Some of the earliest Christian mystics lived in the desert. Islam is a religion born of the desert, and so in many ways is Mormonism. But not everyone allows the disorientation of dry places to point them to what is holy. Some people stay in the confusion. I wanted to film this sermon here in the San Joaquin Valley because whenever there is a drought, Californians start squabbling over water and who should use it. People here in the valley say water should be used for agriculture. People who live in the coastal cities say water should follow the population, and more people live in the city, so why not give more water to the city? In my opinion, that's about like calling a burrowing rodent a prairie dog. The fact is, if you live in Oakland, but you eat food produced here in the valley, then agricultural water usage is urban water usage. And without an urban market, none of these farmers would have a place to sell their crops. So urban water usage is agricultural water usage. We are all connected. And recognizing that connection is one of the ways we find God in times of drought. And by the way, that's not just true in landscapes when rain is in short supply. What is true for water usage is also true for the usage of things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer and beans and bread and chicken and all the other products now missing from the supermarket shelves. If we focus on the lack, if we focus on what is in short supply, we will only see shortage, dryness. We will only see what is lacking. But if we see how dryness and how short supply connect us, then we will see community and we will begin to see God. It is important for us to remember this, to find commonality and connectedness in the disorientation of dry times, because we are living in a disorienting and dry time right now. And it's likely that things might even get more disorienting and dry in the weeks and months to come. We are doing something that none of us has ever done before. We are sheltering in place during a global pandemic. For the first time in most of our lives, we are seeing empty shelves at the supermarket. We are worrying ourselves into distraction over the merest sniffle. And there's no telling when it will end. No telling what the long-term economic impact will be. And so it seems to me that we have a choice. We can allow everything we're going through to turn us into the kind of people who only see what is lacking and then panic, or we can be the kind of people who see our interconnectedness even in times of disorientation and drought. If we can see our neighbors as comrades and fellow travelers rather than rivals for what is in short supply, if we can reach out to one another with acts of generosity and compassion, then we will be doing work that manifests the kingdom of heaven. And we will be connecting to the Spirit who meets us in the dry place. And our souls will sing with the psalmist, Your steadfast love is better than life, O God, and my lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. I will lift up my hands and call on your name. My soul is satisfied as with a rich feast, and my mouth praises you with joyful lips when I think of you on my bed and meditate you in the watches of the night, for you have been my help. Dearly beloved, may God walk with us and strengthen the ties that bind us to one another as we travel through this arid landscape. And let me say, my friends, you at Montclair Presbyterian Church have done a wonderful job of seeing the commonality. You have reached out to each other. You have expressed your concern for one another. May this continue, and may we see God together in the disorientation of this dry place. Amen.